This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today has been involved in the UAV industry for over half a decade. Prior to founding his company, Hudson Valley Drones, he pursued successful ventures in the HVAC and insurance industries. He has always been an active community member, empowering others through his actions and time. He is a member of the local volunteer fire department and the owner, founder, and lead drone operator of Hudson Valley Drones. He's also a personal friend, an inspiration to me, and was my very first guest on my first show, The Shining Light. Please welcome Keith Perry.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Welcome, man. So I'll start with the Shining Light video podcast show, which was a fun experience for us.
It was.
You were my very first guest, whether you wanted to be or not.
Yeah, you kind of you told me it was happening, and I was all about it too. So
yeah,
it was great.
I was doing these for our audience listening here. I was doing these lives from Instagram, and I'd see Keith pop on every now and then. And it was only I think I was only maybe a week or so in, and you popped on, and I was like, hey, put your video on. And you sure did. You put your video on, and next thing I knew, I was interviewing you, and you had no idea what I was doing and why I was doing it.
That's okay.
But it was the spawn of the show.
It was. Hey, I'm glad something good came out of it. It's amazing.
It's how it started, and the reason why I'm starting with that is because that's how this started. So that's really cool. So it's exciting to finally have you on as my guest number 70 something, which is pretty awesome for this show, and very happy to have you here. So we met years back. You were an insurance agent.
I was.
And no longer, and you started HV Drones. Before we get into your whole journey and everything, just because this was in your bio, UAV, what is that?
Unmanned aerial vehicle.
All right.
It's a catch-all, and there's some abbreviations used in the drone industry. UAV, which is unmanned aerial vehicle. UAS, which is unmanned aerial systems. They're all fairly synonymous, but not entirely.
Right.
I'll clarify.
Now we know what they are, and shame on me. I didn't do enough investigating, but I thought that was something that was you could break down for us and make it really, really simple. So I want to get into your entrepreneurial journey, because when I met you, like I said, you were working at Liberty Mutual. You were an insurance agent. I was an insurance agent, so we kind of just hit it off. It was interesting because I think that people in the same industry don't always hit it off, especially in such a competitive industry like insurance. But for some reason, we hit it off. We had a really great conversation that night at what was the Water Street? The market, Village Market.
Village Market in Gardner.
Village Market, yeah. And actually, you had that in here too. We hit it off right away, and then next thing I knew, you're operating drones. And this is why I say you're an inspiration to me, because, I wanted to start my own business while I was first getting to know you. And the next thing I know, you started drone. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. So we can just do that? So it was impressive. So share with me a little bit, or us a little bit, about this journey or this process that you went through to get there.
Thanks. Yeah. I was working in insurance, and I was probably a year into my job as an agent at Liberty Mutual, and I bought a drone to fly as a hobby, and just started flying it and flew it and tried it out. Was learning everything about it, and you'll know this, but as part of being an insurance agent, part of what you do is you network, and you get to know people, and you get to meet other people in different industries. And one thing I found myself, or one group of people that I found myself networking with quite a bit just naturally, was realtors and real estate agents. And I forgot how it happened, but one day a conversation came up with a real estate agent about how I flew drones as a hobby. And all of a sudden it clicked, and they were like, wow, do you think you could take some pictures of a listing for me? And it was something I'd always thought about at a high level, but never really like pushed, transitioned from a hobby to, a business venture until that happened. So the person asked me to take photos of a listing for them, and I did it, and it went really well. And it started to move forward from there, and I realized I had something that I could probably make work for me.
Yeah. And the networking thing I think is key to the whole thing, right? Because it's like you got to meet these different people. Going into that experience where you start doing the real estate shoots and you start doing that, I guess there was this turning point where you were able to say it's profitable, and so therefore I can leave my job.
Yeah, I told myself, so when it first happened, I thought it was going to be a side hustle, and I started getting more work. And I started getting more work, and I started getting work in different industries that wasn't just real estate. And it started getting to the point where it was really hard to juggle those responsibilities with the drones with my full-time job as a real estate agent. So it got to the point where I told myself when I had to start turning away jobs because I had drone jobs because I had a full-time job, I was going to make the leap. And I remember being offered a project on a Friday that I thought I wasn't able to take because of my full-time job. And the following Monday, putting in my 2 weeks at Liberty. 2 weeks later, jumping headfirst into the drone business and figuring it out.
Changed everything.
Yeah.
I love that you talk about how you thought, there's a couple things that you said there that I really like and I want to kind of stay in, is that the first thing is that you made a conscious decision of, I'm not going to make this move until it starts impeding on it, or until making this move impedes on, my current job impedes on making this move. Mm-hmm. And so you were like really smart about keeping your day job, as we talk about, and then keeping this as a side hustle until you had to start turning down gigs because of your day job. So I like that you were very intentional about that. But the other thing that you said that I'd love to kind of really go down even further is how this mindset that you had of, and you may not even realize it as you sit there kind of looking at me going, where is Michael going with this? But you just said it, where you were like, I thought I couldn't leave my job for this big gig that I was getting. And I'm intentionally using gig and not job so we don't confuse the two. Mm-hmm. But I thought I couldn't leave my job for this big gig. And the mindset shift for you was that you figured out that you could. And I'm interested in digging there with you of that little piece there, because that's the piece that so many of us, so many others out there who want to become entrepreneurs, who want to start something, or who want to even just climb the corporate ladder, they don't make that small little assessment of what's going on. So I'm interested in that thought process, if you can kind of recall it.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said about, well, going back to your point, right? It's pretty irresponsible to make the leap from your full-time job to a side hustle if you don't think you can pay your bills with the side hustle, or at least, stand a pretty good chance of getting to that point very quickly. Mm-hmm. So that's really important. But to your point.
So part of the reason why I asked the question is I'm listening right now to Mel Robbins, and she's a speaker, an author, and has podcasts and everything. And part of what she's talking about in the series that I'm listening to right now is exactly what you just said. So here's the example that she laid out for us to kind of help elaborate on this a little bit further. She has a client that wants to become a travel blogger. And this client is single, has an apartment, so no debt, no mortgage or anything like that, single, has an apartment, no pets, no animals to care for, no children, no nothing, and yet doesn't take the leap to become a travel blogger. And so Mel's like, why are you stuck there? Why are you staying there? She said, well, I have this job that I can't leave because if I leave it, then it's irresponsible, as you just said, right? Then it's irresponsible to become a travel blogger. And what Mel's explaining to her is that, but if your vision, if your dream of your life is to be this travel blogger, then you have to make a decision here as to what's more important. And I think that that's what I'm asking. And sometimes the question is confusing because of my framing of it, and I apologize for that. But that's really what I'm asking us to talk a little bit about together here, is that thought process of, one, we feel this obligation to stay where we are. And one, why is that, right? Is there a fear of the new, fear of the unknown? Is there a responsibility pulling us that is not a real responsibility? You know, if you got children and kid and animals and a mortgage and all these holding you, I get it. But is it just because like you just don't want to let your boss down? I mean, they're going to find somebody else, right?
Yeah, maybe. And, you know, maybe this is people of our generation speaking, right? We've kind of always been conditioned growing up that you go to high school and then you go to college and then you get a job, right? And a lot of times starting your own business isn't really in that thing that we're conditioned to do. But I think if you really think about it, like maybe it's irresponsible. You know, maybe someone could view it as irresponsible, or maybe someone could view it as risky or not following through in your job. But I think you're being irresponsible to yourself if you don't take that leap. You know, our lives are relatively short in the scheme of things. And there's not many better times than now. Plus the downside, as long as you're, you know, keeping your financial house in order and not making a crazy snap jump from your job, the downside potential isn't as much as I think we make it to be in our heads. What's the worst thing that happens? You fail. Maybe we don't call it fail. Maybe the business doesn't work and you learn and you go back and get another job. You know, it's not as bad, and the downside isn't as bad as what I think we think it could be.
Right. And it's so funny that you said, and maybe you get another job, because I'm kind of like thinking that that's funny, because I know that when I've had struggles at Den 10, our insurance agency, I've had struggles at Michael Esposito Inc., financial that is that, you know, I go down that path of like, well, maybe I got to get a job, right? And I'll go down that like Indeed path, like check out the app and see what's going on in there. All right, who's hiring? What are they hiring at? And I start reading the description of like what they are asking to do or whatever. And it's not that I don't want to do the things. It's that I'm like, yeah, I don't want to work for anybody.
I'm glad I'm not the only person that like feels that way. Like, you know, yes, the worst thing I'm saying is going back to getting a job, but that's like one of my biggest fears, going back and like working for someone. That just sounds horrible to me. Working for yourself is the best thing on the planet. And it's something that I hope everyone gets to enjoy at some point in their lives. But yeah, I do the same thing. When you have a rough day or a rough week or a rough month, sometimes you think about
maybe I'll pick up a part-time job at Stewart's or something.
Yeah, or I'll drive Uber, or I'll do something like that, or you think about it. It's something that goes through your head.
I like Stewart's. That seems like a nice place to work.
I love Stewart's. Stewart's is great.
Great ice cream. I mean, you just make yourself a smoothie on a rough day. Like, why not?
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that you really enjoy about being self-employed?
I like being able to set my own schedule. I like being able to not necessarily answer to someone. You know, I have to answer to my responsibilities and to my clients, but I don't really have to answer to a supervisor or a boss who may or may not always be on the same wavelength as me. I think I can summarize it by saying the freedom. The freedom is it. And I heard a quote one time, and you've probably heard it too, and it was something along the lines of, an entrepreneur is the only person crazy enough to work 16 hours a day to avoid working 8 hours a day for someone else.
Yes.
So to the point, like, we have freedom when we run our own business, but sometimes we're working 16 hours a day to get that freedom. So, you know, it's give and take.
It's freedom of the mind is what I think. It's the freedom that I think we're, you know, you used the word conditioned, right? So conditioned to believe in is this freedom of like, I can go here and I can go there and I can do this and I can do that. Or, I have an 8-hour a day and I clock in at this time and I clock out at that time and therefore I'm free. But it's freedom of the mind as an entrepreneur, and I always like to bring in our business leaders as well as the people who work for companies, because I know that they're listening on the other side too. So this, I think, applies to them too, is that when you have freedom of the mind, when you start creating your own mental schedule and your own goals inside of wherever you are, there's no longer this like feeling where you're beholden to a manager or beholden to anything else. And therefore, that's when we hit that flow state, right? Where it's like, if you're working at a corporation, they're like, what are you doing here? It's 6 o'clock. You were supposed to, I'm working on a project and I want to be the best at this project and I want to do it. Like, I mean, if we think about our athletes, they're working for giant corporations, right? LeBron James is working for a huge corporation called the NBA. He's working then for a smaller corporation, which is still huge, called the Los Angeles Lakers, right? So he's working for these he's an employee at these corporations. Yet, because he has his own vision, because he has his own goals, because he has this freedom of mind that we're talking about, he invests in himself to become healthy. He invests in himself to work out longer. He's staying at the gym later to shoot more shots. He's doing all these different things for himself, which then affect the corporations that he works for in a positive way. But if you ask LeBron James, do you feel free or not free? He'd probably say, I feel free. But meanwhile, you look at this guy's schedule and you're like, this guy is not free. He is always busy, right?
Sure.
But he's free in the mind because he's making those decisions. He's calling those plays. So I feel like, as entrepreneurs, we learn that we call the plays, but you can also do that, even if you're working in a business, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
So I'm interested in if you were ever able to call the shots when you were in the HVAC business. Some of the things that you mentioned in the bio that you sent over were that you learned a lot when you worked in the HVAC business. So I'm interested in some of those findings. Yeah.
So I worked in heating and air conditioning for probably the better part of 10 years. It was my first job when I was in high school and out of high school and, in my early 20s and even into my mid 20s. And it was a fairly decent sized local plumbing, heating and air conditioning company. And it taught me a lot of the things that I learned that I wanted to do with my business now. But it also taught me some things that I didn't necessarily want to do with my business as well. But it kind of gave me an incredible business education that I don't think I could have ever gotten in a school or, by reading a book.
Yeah. What were some of the things that you knew that you didn't want to do or bring into your business?
So I think being customer centric is always like the number one most important thing about your business. You need to keep your customer as your number one priority. You need to be providing your client and your customers with a great product. You need to provide great customer service. You need to do what you say you're going to do and show up when you say you're going to show up. And once you get to the point where your client or your customer isn't the central focus, I think you start to deviate from your mission and, start to fail as a business person. So one of the things that I found was most important is just making sure that you keep the client as the shining light in the middle of everything you're doing with the business and every decision.
Of all the processes.
Yes, sir.
When you say customer-centric, it's so funny because I just had a meeting yesterday with one of our carriers, our insurance carriers, and being an independent agency, we have a lot of them. And every one of them will say, how's your experience? And they'll ask that question. And they'll say, because we pride ourselves on service and we pride ourselves in being the best who provide service. And we're not just saying that. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you're right. You're not just saying that. You are one of 20 who just said it to me. And in the insurance industry, and this, I say our industry because it was passed for you. That's one of the things that insurance agents, say the same thing, is that we pride ourselves on our service. We have the best service. But you find that more often than not, it falls short. And I'm interested in what you define as customer-centric.
I think being customer-centric is making sure that you both understand your client's expectations and meet those expectations. Because it's impossible, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's challenging to meet a client's expectations if you don't have that conversation up front and don't know what their expectations are. You might have a different, you might go to get your car repaired or go to a restaurant, and you might have a different thing that makes you happy and makes you feel like you had a great experience than me. And it's important to, as part of the sales process, explore that with the customer and kind of understand what their end objective is. And then making sure that everything you're doing is bringing them closer to their goal. So to me, it's understanding the client's expectations and doing everything you can to try to meet those expectations.
Yeah. I like that how you said that too, because, while one company might say, we offer the best service and we service all of our clients within 24 hours. Another company might say, we offer the best service and we service all of our clients within 10 hours. But you as a customer might say, I want to call in 2 hours. And if neither one of those companies meet that expectation, then to you, they're bad service.
Right.
To them, they believe they're providing great service, but they never asked you, what does good service look like for you? And so I love that that's part of one of the ways that you identify it. The other one is moving them closer to their goals. I'm assuming that has a lot to do with what you do in the drone business today, is understanding the goal of your client, right?
Yeah, drones and the drone industry in general is very young and it's very new. And a lot of people have a vision in their mind of what a drone can do and aren't always sure how to get there. So it's important to have a conversation with someone, before we start working and understand that, what a drone can do and what a drone can't do and how a drone can be part of a process to make your lives easier or your business better, and exploring that.
Yeah, I think that that's important for them to understand, because for me, when I think about a drone, I think about like just flying over things and like getting like the layout of the land. I don't think about it as real estate, right? Like that's a whole different thing, right? And understanding that, do you fly the drone inside? Do you fly it outside? Like, how does it work? What kind of space do you need? And then like, what happens if it crashes into a wall?
Yeah, those are all things that you have to think about. And one thing that I talk to clients about a lot of times, like as part of this process, is that all a drone is a tool. It's a camera on a tripod that floats in 3D space. That's all it is. And the quality of the output that you get from it is based on the quality of the person operating the drone and their understanding of what you want to accomplish with the drone. So to say I just want some drone shots of a house, you could want drone shots of a house for a roof inspection. You could want it for an insurance inspection. You could want it for a real estate listing. You could want it for some degree of like a film shoot or something like that. And all of those different things, you would use the same drone or maybe a different drone, but you would use a drone in a different way or a different angle or different settings or, a different sensor to accomplish that.
Right. What about racing them? Do you race them ever?
I don't.
Those are pretty cool.
I do
right?
have an FPV drone that I do some work with. But
that's pretty wild how they do that.
It's really cool, and it's cool that it's on ESPN, which is something that's funny to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would consider it a sport, but
that's how I learned about it the first time.
It's interesting.
Yeah, where they just put on the goggles and they're just like flying these things, and like, how did that happen? Like, that's just wild. I guess two people got together and were like, let's race.
Yeah, I mean, take anything fast, right? And cars or motorcycles or drones or
just start
anything.
doing it all.
Yeah.
I kind of worked a little bit backwards here in my normal format of the podcast and going into your industry, but I'm also interested into your background, because you obviously are a hungry individual in terms of accomplishing goals and ambition and drive to success. And I'm interested in where that all came from for you. What stimulated that early on for you to where you're like, you know what, I'm going to be the best HVAC, helper here. I'm going to be the best insurance agent here, be the best drone operator here. What was the catalyst to all of that through your development?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not exactly sure. I can't pin it down to like an exact specific thing. I mean, I know it's something that my parents always instilled on me, right? Trying to do the best at what you're doing. I remember like being, I want to say 7 or 8, like being in karate, right? And having my parents but encourage me to practice my forms for 15 minutes before I got on the bus every day. And telling me the importance of practicing and how practicing makes you better and makes you perform better at like a tournament or, I mean, I don't even remember what it's called now. But I think I owe a lot of that to my parents for instilling those beliefs in me. I mean, who wants to be mediocre? You want to be the best at what you do, no matter what it is.
So taking you off or putting you on the bus, making sure that you got that like 5 or 15 minutes of has helped. I'm glad to hear that because I do that to my daughters. My daughters are in several different sports, but also they're in ballet and dance. And I'll go. I once did ballet. Little fact for you. I once did ballet when I was a kid, but I think it's also just this mindset of intentionality that I have. And so anyway, but on the ballet side here, before they go to class or like at home, I'll see them do certain moves and I'm like, no, we got to go back and we got to make sure that, you're in first position properly and that we're pointing your toes and straight leg and doing all this stuff. And I'm glad to see that might pay off to their ambitions later on in life. Yeah,
no doubt. And I'm more amazed to hear that you did ballet for a significant amount of time. That's awesome. That's something new I had no idea about.
Yes, you could find pictures of an 8-year-old Michael in a leotard. I don't know if they're on the internet, but they're certainly in my mother's books at home.
I love it.
So tell us more about this upbringing. So you have this, your parents, what were they like? What did they do? Were they entrepreneurs? Were they in business at all?
Yeah, so both my parents worked at IBM for a very long time. They were back in, the time when you would get a job at a big company and work there until you retired. And that's where they both met. Actually, they met at IBM. My dad, when he wasn't working his full-time job at IBM, started a business, a pool repair and leak detection business. So what he does, actually he still does it to this day, but what he used to do and still does is scuba dive in swimming pools that have leaks in them and repair the liner without the person having to drain all the water out of it, which is like a huge cost savings and a huge time savings and, ultimately saves the client money and gets them back to using their pool more quickly. So he did that, and I feel like, looking back on it, I took a lot from him building that business on the side.
What were some of the lessons that you might have learned from him when he was in that business or that he currently does today?
I think one of the things that he does that is most important is like, making sure that he does it right or he doesn't, charge the customer.
Wow.
Which is huge. And like going to my business, I mean, there's certainly times where I've done a job for a client that wasn't up to par and I may not have charged them the full amount or anything. But like, being customer centric and making sure that the job is done right and the customer's happy with it at the end of the day, and that's like the number one priority.
It's funny, we have similar backgrounds in terms of that. Like my father is a physician's assistant, a PA, and has always been and always employed by different hospitals and doctors' clinics as a PA. He's now in his 70s, but growing up, he started a skincare business, a hair product and skincare line, or business that is, not line, and would, outside of work, outside of his normal day job, would create product in our basement, which was also our playroom. So it smelled like garlic and all sorts of different types of new things that he was coming up with formulas. But garlic was the one that stuck around a lot. He had this like famous garlic shampoo that was really great for the hair, and he sold it. He wholesaled it to a distributor, and this was all done in Queens. A distributor in Queens, who he still actually that gentleman since passed. he still works with his wife, and she's got her own line and does something different with her. But I just remember that growing up, and we would have these big drums in the basement, and my GI Joes would be scattered around them, and he would be like there with the big thing and mixing and stirring, and then he would involve me in the process, not necessarily to teach me, but because he needed an extra set of hands.
Hey, if it works.
But I remember, and his desk had all sorts of different things on it for the business, for the skincare, the skincare and hair product business. But I feel like that left a mark on us, as like we can have these jobs, but we also have this we could also have these side hustles, and they could turn into something. And I actually recently learned that he did actually, because I was saying to him one day, something more with that. And I was like, well, you did great. It's my dad, right? Like, got to make him feel good now, right? When I was in my teenage years, if he would have said that to me, I would have, hit him in the gut, right? I would have been a little bit of a jerk. But, now looking back, I'm like, no, you did great. You supported our family. You got us we went on ski trips. We did wonderful things, and it was because of your job, right? And then I found out that he did actually, when I was younger, when I was maybe a baby or something, because I don't remember this at all. He did actually quit being a PA for a little while, a short period of time, to do this business. But it wasn't bringing in enough, and so he had to go back. But I mean, I feel like that leaves a mark on us. Like, it's just, oh, all right, we can do something here, right?
Yeah, that's incredible. And to the point, that's incredible that he took that leap, regardless of what happened afterwards. And it shows that, if you make the leap and something doesn't work out, the worst case scenario is just get a job.
Right.
So it's not all that bad, and it's not all that risky.
Yeah.
But that's amazing.
Yeah, there's always a safety net there, as much as like Tony Robbins talks about burn the bridges. It's like you could burn the bridges unless you're a jerk or whatever, but you could burn the bridges, but there's always going to be a way to, swim back to shore. You're going to be all right.
And you can tactfully burn a bridge. That wouldn't be burning a bridge, that would be crossing a bridge and maybe disassembling it, and leaving the option to reassemble that bridge in the future. And that's probably how I would prefer to end, business relationships. But yeah.
Well, when Tony Robbins, just so for our listeners here, is talking about burning the bridges, and he says the bridges, not burning bridges, he's not talking about relationships. He's talking about get rid of the safety net, just quit the job and start your own business, right? I also know that your mother was a huge influential part of your success. And left a lot of, I think, lessons for you to be learned, to continue doing as you do today. Share with us a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah, sure. So a little bit of background, I guess. So my mom passed away about 6 months ago, unfortunately, due to pancreatic cancer. She fought a hard battle for 18 months and ultimately passed away, but she instilled a lot of things in me that I still think impact me and influence who I am today. I remember, so going back, I mentioned before about turning down a job, a gig on a Friday and putting in my 2 weeks on a Monday. And I was actually in Myrtle Beach, where my parents live, that weekend and talked to my mom about it. She encouraged me to do it. And she encouraged me to do a lot of things and kind of, I would get myself to the edge of that proverbial cliff, and she would help me jump, not a bad way, in a good way, of course. But, the quitting my job to pursue the career and in drones and, some other ventures and some real estate that I've purchased and that sort of thing. And she really, helped me get right over that last bit of reservation. And I'm incredibly grateful for that.
What was one of her techniques that she would use to help encourage you?
She would just say, just do it. Just be very curt and, she was a very matter of fact, no fluff kind of person. So she's, just do it. What's the worst that's going to happen?
What was something about her that made it different coming from her? Obviously, she's your mother, but coming from her versus somebody else maybe that might say, just do it, just take the leap?
I don't know. Just, the fact that my mom knew me probably for longer. Yeah, actually for longer than anyone else. So
an inner belief, a belief in you is what helped in that.
Yeah, for sure.
She wouldn't trust that you trusted that she wouldn't tell you to take the leap if she didn't think it was something you were capable of handling.
Yeah, she wouldn't steer me wrong. So I got nothing to worry about if she tells me it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and on the topic of your mom and her passing, you also got married, and she was able to witness that as well.
Yeah, we got my wife. My wife and I got married in September of 2021 in Myrtle Beach, and it was shortly after my mom got diagnosed, and she was able to be there, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And it was a great, it was perfect.
Yeah, tell us about that day.
Yeah, we got married on the beach at a state park in Myrtle Beach, and I don't know if that's like what we had pictured as like the fairy tale perfect wedding, but it was perfect because my mom got to be there, and Dina, my wife, was. I mean, obviously she was there, but it was perfect for her too, and we had our friends and our family there, and it was small, and it was great. It was perfect.
I want to just of course acknowledge your mom and you being so open to talk about it, especially so soon. So I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to kind of relate it back to the conversation that we're having in life, or that we're having, is that in life, things aren't perfect. And, while we might have this one vision for a business, we might have this one vision for a venture, it can change. And there's a lot of reasons why it can change. It could be a business partner who's diagnosed. It could be any other thing, any other variable. But that while that vision changes, it doesn't end there. And you can kind of change course. And like you said, it wasn't the wedding that you had envisioned, but it was still perfect. And I feel like that's kind of like the same thing in our lives, right? In the life of business, as this is a business podcast. At least that's how iHeart and iTunes categorize it. I think it's a little bit more than that.
Oh, I agree.
But in terms of the relation of business, is that, that's life, right? Is that like things aren't always the path. And I think it's such a great message and story to share in that with our community here, in that you might have had this vision graduating high school and college of like, I'm going to be this big corporate lawyer and I'm going to make all this money and it's going to be wonderful. Or this vision of quitting your job and starting this amazing business that's going to just set the world on fire and create new things. But it changed. Something happened and it changed. And that's all right, because you're going to be able to find a new path and a new different, right? And I think that that's really cool. I think it's also important to stay here for a moment if you're comfortable with that.
Sure.
Because you also wrote about grief and overcoming grief. And I think that we can experience grief and sadness in so many different areas in our lives. And of course, losing a loved one like your mom, who was such an inspiration and a mentor to you, and somebody who really helped you make the decisions that got you to where you are today. And, obviously we could talk about that there, but there's also grief in leaving a job. You could be at a job for a really long time and, just realize it's not right for you and have to leave or get fired or whatever the case is. So there's all sorts of different types of grieving, maybe the loss of a business, of like we talked about earlier, failure in business, and that happens, right? So there's grief. And I thought you brought up some really, really great ways of dealing with grief. And I want to say dealing, not overcoming, because it's also important to stay there sometimes. And you kind of talked about that. So if you'd like, I can repeat them back to you and we can talk about them, because I know you might not remember them off top. But I thought it was so nice how you laid this out. And you said, I'm going to actually just read exactly what you said, and then we'll kind of just talk a little bit about it, because I think you said it so well. And you said, I'm still learning how to deal with the sadness and frustration and grief. But it's really taught me the importance of health and family and what really matters in life. Sometimes you have to practice self-care. Sometimes you just have to grit your teeth and move forward. Sometimes you have to get up and show up even when you don't think you can. And sometimes you can't. And sometimes that gets me. But you have to do your best every day. And even on days when you're not 100%, you can try to give something. I just got choked up reading it, man. I know that relates a lot to your mom, but like we're talking about in the business sense, like that's dealing with grief, right? I would like to go into practicing self-care. What does self-care look like for you?
Self-care for me is, trying to take care of myself, physically.
Trying to care for myself.
Care for myself, right? Taking care of myself physically, going to the gym, trying to eat right, trying to get enough rest. But I think it's also like being kind to yourself and being kind to, the way that you talk to yourself and being maybe empathetic to yourself. I don't know, empathetic to your own situation and not be so hard on yourself. So I think, being easy on yourself is a really good form of self-care.
Yeah, I like that you said that, like be easy on yourself, empathetic with yourself. So we talk a lot about like give yourself grace, especially in the personal development space. It's give yourself grace. I think that's a really great way to put it. It's like be easy on yourself.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not easy to be easy on yourself, but we should be treating ourselves the way that we treat other people. So and I think a lot of times we don't do that. We're nicer to other people than we are to ourselves. And it's important that we take a few moments and sometimes think about that, think about our self-talk. And that's incredibly important to the way that we can move on through our day.
What does self-talk sound like to you?
I'm like anyone else. So some days it's like, oh man, I can't do this. This is hard. And other days it's like, no, you can do this. You've made it through every day so far. Just keep going. In a few hours, this day is going to be over and you're going to move on to tomorrow and it might be better or, so it's a combination of each, but sometimes you got to pull yourself back and say, let's just keep going. Let's do this, let's get it done.
Do you say it out loud or do you say it to yourself?
I usually say it to myself in my head, but.
Never out loud?
I'm sure I have sometimes. I don't know. I think I do it in my head most of the time.
I think I literally speak, I know that I actually address myself in the third person and I'm like, Michael, that's what I'm mad at myself. I'm like, Michael, I'll yell at myself. It's probably my dad because that's the way he used to say my name when he was not happy with me. But I think there's also some importance to saying it out loud of just getting it out, right? Just getting it out. And, but then also, like you said, reeling it back in and be easy on yourself and let yourself know that it's all good. So I love that you talk about self-talk. And then the other things that you mentioned were going to the gym and eating right and things like that. What does that look like for you? Is there a schedule in that, or how do you manage that? Like when we think about our community that's listening here, how do you manage doing all of those different things in terms of self-care and also operate a business?
It's a balancing act. A lot of times people start businesses and neglect their health. And a lot of times, that's an easy trap to fall into. And I think that's something that I definitely fell into when I started my business and focusing more on the business sometimes than focusing on cooking yourself good food or getting out and going for a walk or even going to the gym. I'm not embarrassed to say I hired a fitness coach probably 6 or 7 months ago now just to give me something to motivate me. And it was the best thing I've ever done. Encouraged me to track my calories, exercise, little goals and little manageable steps. And I feel like it really, helped me keep myself on track. And then you can perform better in business when you feel better and you're in better health. So it's good all around.
I love that, kind of like comes full circle. And you said you hired a fitness coach to kind of help you stay on track. And more than just laying out a plan, but also kind of have that accountability, right?
I think the accountability is like the best part because, we would do like weekly email check-ins and I would find myself thinking like, oh, I'm going to eat this for dinner. And I was like, no, I got to check in. I don't want to explain that I ate this for dinner. And it was good. It was really good from an accountability standpoint. But it was also good because he focused on making things manageable and like, building a diet that's good for the long term. So not not eating cake and not eating ice cream and not having a hamburger every once in a while, but just doing everything in moderation and, keeping track and making up for it.
So far, I think you named 3 of my favorite cheat foods are like a hamburger, cake, and ice cream.
There's a reason why I said those. Mike. There's a reason.
I love cake with ice cream.
Yes.
I actually, with my, I was telling you earlier about my intermittent fasting, and so I currently do intermittent fasting on a regular basis, and right now I'm in a 24-hour fast, and so you might hear my belly grumbling here on the other side of the audio and of the table. But that is my reward, is a giant on Sundays, which is not, which is done intentionally. On Sundays, I make myself this giant ice cream sundae where it's like everybody in the house look at it and go like, seriously, Michael? Seriously? It contradicts everything I'm learning about fasting, contradicts everything I'm learning about, sugar intake and becoming insulin resistant and all that other stuff, contradicts all of it. But it's literally, I put like little chunks of whatever cake I could find around the house or cookies and just different flavors of ice cream and peanut butter and chocolate chips and any junk that I haven't had is going in there.
I love it. What's your go-to ice cream flavor?
It's short of a hamburger going in there. My go-to ice cream flavor would I'm in a bit of a battle right now, a quandary here.
Ooh,
it's because of all the garbage I'm throwing into this thing. So it would be chocolate. So I would get chocolate ice cream. That would be like, if I was just getting a simple ice cream, it would be like a chocolate ice cream, soft serve in a cone with chocolate sprinkles, right? But because I have turned into this monster on Sunday evenings of like, I haven't had any sugar and I'm going to make my head explode, I actually like vanilla, because it mixes well with all the other chocolate that I add.
Okay, all right.
How about you? What's your ice cream of choice?
Oh, I'm like a butter pecan kind of guy. Like that's like a real old man ice cream flavor, I feel. But big fan.
Well, I like that you kind of like came out of the different part of the freezer aisle of like chocolate, vanilla to butter pecan.
Going back to Stewart's, man. Great ice cream selection. Butter pecan. Peanut butter pandemonium, whatever you need.
Peanut butter, yeah.
Ooh.
Peanut butter and ice cream, and I'm sorry, everyone, we're just going to stay here for a minute. But peanut butter and ice cream is this newfound thing for me that I'm like, why wasn't I doing this before? This is amazing.
It's a game changer, that salty and sweet kind of savory and sweet combination. It's a problem.
It's a problem, and because I'm an extremist, I'm like, well, why not add something else to this? So I have put jelly in there.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll have to try that. I've never even thought of that.
I told you this concoction is just terrible.
Wow.
So I've actually added jelly to the whole, and it's not like a lot of jelly, and it's because it's like this it's actually in one of the jars, this Bon Mama. They make this like wild berry jam. And again, it's because I'm not eating this stuff during the week, so I'm like, all right, so I'm going to put a scoop of that in. And so, because it's delicious, so I put a scoop of that in. And what I've learned, and this is why the vanilla ice cream has come into play here, is that like I have to kind of like section these things off. Because if I just mix them all in, like the chocolate becomes overwhelming and you don't taste it. So it's like I've sectioned them off into these like little groupings on my little ice cream bowl of like the vanilla with the peanut butter and the jam, and then the chocolate with more peanut butter and some chocolate chips. And then because my daughters have to get the Napoleon, I think it is, which is the vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, so that we can kind of get the mix for them when they get it. Now I have the strawberry in there, and that's nice with just the jam. And you put it in the, we're going to get back to business now.
I've got things to work on this weekend, clearly. I've got some homework. I've got to try these concoctions.
So I don't know how we got here, but I think you said something about ice cream, and I'm hungry right now. So
yeah. It's all right. It's good. We went off the rails, but that's okay.
We got a little bit off the rails here. All right, so we're gonna bring us back into our work-life balance, and I'm gonna go into harmony in life, because I feel like it's a good segue from what we just talked about, in that you're talking about fitness coaching, you're talking about eating healthy, and I'm talking about eating bowls of ice cream sundaes. But there's this balance that has to happen, and you mentioned that earlier. And I think that when we go back to having a drone business, having any type of business, and then also this life, you also mentioned that you invest in real estate. It's kind of like having it all harmonized together. And I'm interested in part of how you create that harmony in all of it, of balancing, you have pets, the wife, shout out to Dina, of course, pets, the wife, the real estate business, the drone business, trying to stay healthy, dealing with, of course, everything that's happening in your family. Where do you find this harmony, and what are some of the other things that you do in order to find that or create that?
So it's always a challenge. I think it's a challenge for anyone with a bunch of different things that they're doing in life, but I think it gets a little bit harder when you're running your own business. And I mean, I work out of a home office, so sometimes it's really hard for me to really delineate the different things and without them all merging together, but at the same time kind of merging together. So I try to set a concrete schedule of when I work on certain things. I've been recently practicing time blocking, so trying to do that. And sometimes it works, and I mean, sometimes it doesn't. So it's always a conscious thing that you always have to consciously be focusing on something and trying to stay in that lane and hopefully not worry about it too much when you're not in that lane. Family time is family time. Drone time is drone time. Real estate time is real estate time. And try your best.
I like that you said try your best. I also love that you brought up time blocking because it's something I talk about a lot. And I'm interested in how you time block.
I write it out on paper the night before. And
pen and paper,
because I find
right next to your butter pecan.
Yes, yes. I do it at my desk the night before I'm wrapping up. When I'm wrapping up the prior day,
okay.
And I just draw out little time blocks on loose leaf paper and do my best to time block my day, because I find me as a person, if I'm doing it electronically, I find myself starting to do something else. If I'm holding my phone and going back to checking my phone to check my calendar, and then I find myself getting lost in something else very easily. So I put it on paper and I try to stick to it. And as ideas pop in my head throughout the day that I might have to focus on tomorrow, I jot them down, get them out of my brain. And then hopefully when I time block for the next day, I can put some of those new tasks in for the next day, if appropriate.
Where'd you learn the idea of jotting those notes down when they're popping in your head?
Oh, I think it's just pure. I
don't know. Innate.
I needed to. I needed to, because if I don't, I lose it. You get all these great ideas that pop into your head, and the brain's a great place for coming up with ideas, but it's not a great place for tracking ideas and keeping track of them long term. So, it was just pure necessity, I guess.
Well, I ask because, you must have learned it somewhere. Somebody had that habit and you mimicked it, mirrored it, maybe didn't realize it, but you learned it somewhere, because I know for me it was something I had to learn. It was a habit or a behavior that actually was taught to me that I had to learn to start doing. And that I always give a shout out to Matt Alfonso for that. That was in his mindful living coaching program that he had, and that I went through. And I was explaining to him, I said, Matt, it's hard for me to focus because I have all these great ideas that pop in my head. And so I go down the rabbit hole with those, and, long story short, that's what I would explain is essentially. And he said, well, why don't you just get like a Post-it and just write them down, and then that's it. And then they're there. And then, if they're important, you'll go back to them. If they're not, and you downloaded them. And ever since I did that, it was like a huge game changer for me. It was just huge. And what you realize is you throw out a lot of those Post-its and you keep some. And the ones that you keep, you actually are good ideas and you can expand on them. The other thing I like that you do is you do it through paper and not electronic. And I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit more about that strategy. I know you just said because you get distracted if you are on the computer. And that happens to so many of us, right? And there's so many great apps, I have a diary app, I have a vision board app, I have all these great apps, and then you go to turn them on, and next thing you know, you notice a notification, and then you're an hour in, you're like, wait, why was I on my phone again?
Yeah, I've been trying to focus on finding those time sucks and those time wastes of things that are just taking time out of my day, and getting lost in my phone or the computer is one of those things. So if I can just keep myself away from it, and doing my task sheet, my time blocking on paper, that's what works for me.
Right.
There's also something satisfying, at least for me, about like that tactileness, that feeling of writing something down and actually solidifying it as opposed to actually typing it. It's kind of like reading a book versus reading something on your iPad. There's something a little bit, I guess, satisfying about it for me. And yeah, I mean, it works for me.
Yeah, I like using all of them. So I also write. Obviously, I have a pen in my hand here, and I like to write as well. And it's weird because I didn't think that would be something for me, right? Like I thought like I'd be typing everything. I thought I'd be on because I'm like all about the tech and all the. And then I realized that writing it in a journal, writing it in a book is just so different. It's just such a different experience. And then when you look back, actually. It's actually easier to look back at. Like you would think that because I use Google Docs and all of that's there, that it'd be easy to just go back and look at it. But you don't really thumb through your Google Docs. Like you scroll and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that day, and that's it. But like when you open up your journal and you're like, oh, and then you start reading it, you're like, whoa, I wrote that. It is a different feeling, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive, I think. Another thing that you brought up in terms of this moving on with grief and dealing with it is gritting your teeth and moving forward. And that could be hard to just like kind of like bite down and just go. I'm interested in that strategy and how that could apply in our lives, even outside of grief.
Yeah, there's times in life, and it happens to everyone every day. There's times in life where we've committed to things, or we've made commitments to our clients, or we've made commitments to our friends or our family or ourselves. And, we make that commitment with the best intentions of wanting to do it. And then the morning comes or the evening comes when that engagement comes up. And all of a sudden we're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get up and go to the gym. I do not want to go out to dinner tonight. And sometimes you just have to do it. And once you start doing it and you start that inertia and you start moving, you're okay. It's not that bad. You start doing it for 5 minutes or you start doing anything for 5 minutes and it's.
Yeah, it's creating momentum.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that momentum is so important. And there's good and bad momentum. And I think that is something that, we're kind of also talking about here is that, there's that bad momentum of I could sit in this place wherever I am, whatever's happening, and create bad habits around it of maybe watching too much Netflix or scrolling too much or doing whatever's unhealthy for me or not moving me forward. Those become habits and those create momentum to just keep scrolling, right? Like just to keep it simple here. So there's momentum in both phases. And what you're talking about is creating positive momentum towards your goals, towards the things that get you to the next phase. And I think, and I like that you brought up just going out to dinner, because that could be hard sometimes, especially when going through grief. That could be hard. That could be hard if you just got fired. That could be hard if your job is failing or your company is failing. It could be hard to go to dinner and have to look people in the eye and have a normal conversation with them. But by gritting your teeth, and we're not saying like to make believe it's not, it's all daisies. We understand that there's some times that you got to be authentic about everything that's happening, but also sometimes where it's not anybody else's business either. But by doing that, you're creating positive momentum. You don't know who you're going to go to dinner with or who you're going to run into or who might run into you. And that could be a new opportunity or a new person in your life that can inspire you or bring you great joy, right?
You're right.
So, create some positive momentum, I think, is a really great lesson in that moving forward. And I like that you really talk about that. And then the other one that you talk about is to show up even when you don't think you can. What's that look like when you don't think you can?
Yeah, at least for me, it's for, the days where you wake up and you just don't feel like doing something that day. You don't feel like getting up. You don't have the energy to get up. You just don't have that drive. And sometimes you don't have a choice. You just got to get up and do it. Mm-hmm. And once you start moving, going back to that momentum thing, you start going in the right direction. And eventually you forget that you didn't feel like you could do it in first thing in the morning, and you just keep pushing through it.
What are some of the thoughts that go through your mind when you're feeling that way of I can't get up, or I can't do this, or any of those limiting beliefs? What are some of the ones that you would kind of be able to say, you know what, that's a limiting belief?
I have too much to do today. I have a lot going on. You have a lot going on. Everyone has a lot going on. But if you don't start working on that stuff, that list of things is going to get bigger, and those deadlines are going to get closer. And even if you get up and start working towards one of those goals, you're going to put yourself in a better situation for tomorrow.
I like that, because that's the overwhelm, right? And so many of us feel overwhelmed, and that overwhelm is literally overwhelming to the point where it could keep you in bed, keep you on the couch, wherever you are, keep you stationary. And that overwhelm, what I've learned through my coach is to break it down into smaller bite-sized chunks. All right, so I'm overwhelmed. I'm feeling this whatever, anxiety, stress, pressure. What are the things? And I love that we talked about writing, right? Because write them down, right? Make a list.
Absolutely.
What are the things? Next thing you know, as soon as you start writing that list down, you mentioned it before of that feeling, there's nothing better than this feeling. But once you write them down, there's nothing better than a feeling of looking at this overwhelm list and being like, that's it?
A lot of times you realize that what you're worrying about and what you feel like you're overwhelmed about really isn't that big of a deal.
Right.
And you could have it done in half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. That hour was going to pass anyway.
Right.
So, use that hour wisely and do the best you can.
Yeah. And Merritt. And so Merritt's my coach.
Yeah.
And so Merritt, I'll go into a session with her every once in a while, and I'll be like, Merritt, I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed. I got 100 things going on. She goes, okay, well, why don't we talk about the things that are going on? Why don't you tell me? And I'll go, well, and then I'll literally list 3 things, just 3. And then she's like, and anything else? And I'm like, no, that's really it. I'm like, it was 3 things, and they were overwhelming me. And the other part to that is that in one of those 3 things, because one of them's always there for me, nobody's got a deadline for it. Nobody has an expectation of me to do it. It's me. I'm putting this deadline, this pressure, this idea on myself. And I wonder, does that happen for you?
Yeah, all the time. I do the same thing. You set these deadlines in your head and you hold yourself to these expectations. And we all do it. And it's healthy to some degree until it gets to the point where it's not. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be overwhelming.
So what do you do with the ones that are deadlines that you've created or expectations that you created for yourself? What do you do with those ones?
I try to break them down. I try to think as reasonably as I can about it and think about this deadline and think about, okay, I've made this deadline in my head. It's not real. I can change it. I can adjust it. I can do what I have to do.
I love that you just said it's not real. It's true, right? It's not real.
It's true. Well, it is. It's both. It's both. It's not real in that it's not tangible, and that happens a lot with what we think and what we feel. It's not real in that we can't hold it, but it's real in that it's in our heads and it's in our minds, and we feel it, and that makes it real.
Right.
So we shouldn't discount it.
Right.
But we should acknowledge it for what it is.
Right.
And use it and try to manipulate it to our advantage.
Right.
That's all we can do.
To have it serve us to some extent. I love that. I always talk about my book here, and I'm like, I'm going to write a book. I'm writing, and it's not like I'm going to write a book. It's not a pipe dream, right? It's not it's going to happen. I haven't made it a priority. That's the truth. But to your point of it's not real. It's I don't have a publisher breathing down my neck saying, you got to write the book. It's me. I'm the one saying it. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And I just haven't made it, to be honest, I just haven't made it a priority yet. But it's going to happen.
I believe in you.
It must happen.
I believe.
I must make it happen. As we kind of just go back to the drone business you were just talking about, or you mentioned it in your bio here, is that the drone business has changed tremendously, and it's still in its infancy. but you talk about it as being a really great tool for companies to save money on. And I'm just interested on what you see for the future of the drone business or of drones. Is there something, new technologies coming out? I know that you also sell drones is it on your website that you sell them?
Yeah, and directly through.
So is there anything cool that you can kind of drop on us right now that we don't know yet about drones? Like, is there some like really cool feature coming out?
Yeah. So there's this concept called remote ID. It's not a concept anymore. It was a concept. Drones are a buzzword a lot of times that kind of freak people out, and people associate drones with surveillance and with like invasions of privacy. And one thing that has ultimately been like an answer to that is this thing called remote ID. So new drones that have been built and released in like the last year or so, and some older models, and some can be retrofitted, have in September are going to have to abide by this thing called remote ID, where a person can ultimately see where the drone operator is and where the drone is flying from an app or some other electronic interface. And there's a lot of good that comes of this in the industry. There's also a lot of potential backlash, and a lot of people in the drone industry aren't necessarily super happy about more regulation. But that's an interesting thing that we're going to have to navigate soon. So I don't know if it is new technology that's going to be happening, and it's going to be something big for people that fly drones. Other than that, automation, AI, not having an actual person piloting a drone, having programs piloting a drone, and having drones give input to the program that is operating them. AI and automated flight, I think, is going to be the way of the future.
So how can AI be used, I guess, in automated flight? Like, what is that? So when you think about, I guess it wouldn't be in the small operations like doing a real estate shoot, right? It would be more in these bigger, larger scale type of things. Right.
So I guess there's kind of two ways you can stratify the drone industry. There's really the creative side of things, and then there's more like the industrial data acquisition side of things. So you really can't, doing creative, taking beautiful photos of a landscape, taking photos of a real estate listing, doing drone videos for production, right? Those are very creative. And those are things that I don't necessarily see being replaced by automation, at least anytime soon. But there are other things like inspections of wind turbines or solar panel farms or roofs or other things related to that, power lines, in which automated flight software and AI is contributing to the way that drones are operated and the way that drones fly, because it's very concrete what needs to be done. It's not so creative, and it's interesting to see that progression.
Yeah, and I just want to go to the wind turbines because I think those are pretty cool. So you've had some really great experiences and opportunities to be able to fly your drone on some of these awesome farms, these wind turbine and solars. While we're kind of like concluding here, any cool stories on some of your field expeditions?
Yeah, a lot of them are really cool. Just being able to go out into the field and fly a drone and get paid for it is like a really cool thing,
right?
And it's things that a lot of people, would love. So it's important to keep that in perspective. It's
already
great.
Really cool.
It's really cool,
right?
A lot of times wind turbine farms are located on the side of mountains or very picturesque areas because they're very windy. So a lot of times, you get to travel to places that are really picturesque and work there while enjoying the view and seeing the country. So that's incredible. And meeting great people in the process. So the traveling is a great part of it.
Yeah, it is cool when you get brought on site on some kind of cool project and you get to experience something that you never got to, that you wouldn't normally, or it's not open to the public, get to experience, which is really, really cool. You also take amazing footage of some really great aerials and beautiful shots of the Hudson Valley region, and I'm sure other parts, but the ones I'm more familiar with are the Hudson Valley region. What's your favorite time of day or shoot that you've done in terms of that, the creative side of things?
Thanks. I like golden hour in the morning, sunrise, dawn, and sunset. And that's cool because that time, the actual time changes throughout the day, and where the sun is located changes throughout the day. So you can take a photograph, the exact same photograph at different times of day, or, at dusk, one in the winter and one in the summer, and the sun's in a completely different location, and you can get like a completely different shot. Yeah. So it's.
Yeah, you've done some really cool stuff with that. I mean, I've actually even had the opportunity to use some of your footage of I think it was the Hudson Bridge, the Mid-Hudson Bridge, in one of my, I think it was a YouTube video that we used it. That's like 2 years ago. It's incredible. But yeah, just great footage, really great pictures that you put out on your Instagram, which is at
HV Drones.
Yep, just simple like that, just at HV Drones on Instagram, and I'm sure on other social media platforms too, right?
Yep, on Facebook, Instagram, those two mostly.
Yeah, and that'll of course be in the show notes. We're not done yet though with Keith. My last question for you has to do with your inspirational quote that you live by. And it doesn't say who it's from, but I have a feeling I know who it is. And it says, "Hang in there and believe in yourself."
Yeah, there was when I was younger, I was probably about 20, and I was going through a pretty hard time in my life for multiple reasons. And my mom sent me a card, and that's all the card said, She's like, "Keith, hang in there and believe in yourself. Love, Mom." And I still have that card. I still have it sitting on my desk. And, sometimes I'll like rearrange my office and like put it somewhere and not find it. And it always seems that I find it when I need to find it. So I find myself going back to that quite often. And, it's been sitting there for the better part of 14, 15 years now, but still helps me out and helps me through the tough times.
You got to frame that one, man.
I know. That's a good idea. I can't lose it then.
That's right. But I do love that you said you find it when you need it most.
It's funny how that happens. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. It just seems to happen.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like so funny, reading your bio, learning about you, and I'm not seeing a name attached to that. I was like, yep, that's Mom. That's Mom. So shout out to her. I want to thank you so much for coming on today. And of course, this will all be in the show notes, but how can people reach you? How can people find you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. You can check out our website, hvdronesny.com, hvdronesny.com, Instagram or Facebook, or you can give us a ring, 845-450-0002.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on today. It's been awesome having you on. We met years ago being part of the chamber. First we met, we weren't part of the chamber, whatever. Everybody kind of just heard that history, but we got to know each other a lot better when we were part of the chamber of the Hudson Valley Young Professionals. And I would just want to impress on our audience on how the importance of those networking functions are, because look at this relationship that we formed back in, I think, 2018, 17, 18, and we kept in contact, we kept in touch, and we just kept supporting each other. And you've always been a great supporter of the work that I do. You've always been somebody that I know I can call on and ask for help or assistance or referrals or whatever it is, and have always been there for me. And so I want to impress that on our audience, is that those relationships that you form right now, you just don't know where they can go. And so I'm just really appreciative of the relationship that we've formed. So thanks for coming on today.
Likewise, I feel the same way, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.